Hello all my Connor kiddos and my family and everybody that's watching. I had to record my video in here today because my sister Amy called and she's like, I think Kate is a huge can you see her open her eye? Kate, are you the superstar of this show? She's so good. She's such a good puppy. So Amy's like, I think Kate should be in all your videos. So here you go. All right. So I showed you the book is Enemy Pie, and I'm reading this today in honor of my naughty children, Ashton and Taylor. So last night, Ashton snuck down into Taylor's bedroom and swiped her TV and took it up to his bedroom. And then I'm getting ready this morning and I heard a series of doors slamming and some yelling. And so they're enemies right now. And they have to work it out, and so I'm making them sit down and read this with me, Enemy Pie, and then we may be making Enemy Pie later today. And Perry's in here too. She's up on my bed snuggling, so she wants to be here for story time. All right, here we go, Enemy Pie. This one is written by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. I read this to my kindergartners years ago, and they loved it, and we made Enemy Pie in class. So you might want to make Enemy Pie with your family today. All right, here we go. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in our backyard, and my sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been the perfect summer, but it wasn't. You guys see the pictures. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game, and he had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. There's his enemy list. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell me how. I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off of the shelf, and inside there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and he squinted at it. Enemy Pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering, what exactly is Enemy Pie? I was wondering. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy Pie is the fastest known way to get rid of your enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't need those either. I gave him the gun I'd been chewing, gum, not gun, gum. I gave him the gun oh my gosh, I had it again. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning, and then he gave it right back to me. Oh no. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof, and then I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of Enemy Pie. This should be a great summer after all. Enemy Pie was going to be so awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it would smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when it was in the backyard, I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs. I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a little bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie should not be smelling this good. But Dad was smart. Well, if enemy pie smells bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like a plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was starting to catch on. But still, I wasn't really sure how enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to your enemies? Maybe it made their hands fall off, or their breath really stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He said quietly to me, "There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a whole day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, and then he would be out of my hair for the rest of my life. So I rode my bike to his house, and I knocked on his door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed kind of surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and he looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was so nervous. Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said, and he came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. "You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. Look at those faces. They don't look like they're going to get into any trouble. We rode our bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard to make enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop, and so he wished he had had a basketball hoop too. But then he didn't have room for one at his house, so I let him win a game just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house into the backyard. We climbed over the fence to find it. The first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go in?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies are not allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and I tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in my treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. That is like the happiest dad ever. Must be the glasses. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie, and I watched as he cut the pieces into 8 thick slices. Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Best picture of the whole book. Dad dished up 3 plates, side by side, with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream, and he passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at my pie. My dad never makes pies like this. It was at this point that I began to panic. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it! I think it's poisonous or something. His fork dropped, and it stopped right before it reached his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and he looked at me really funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. Well, if it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why's your dad already eaten half of his? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair, and it seemed like it was safe enough. So I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline that next morning. He said he'd teach me how to do a flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath does turn bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer because I just lost my best enemy. And that's the end. So we might be making enemy pie for Taylor and Ashton so that they can be friends again. I don't know. What do you think, Kate? She's too tired to talk about it. Okay. All right, I hope you have a lovely day. I'm going to go finish washing the rest of my windows today, and I hope you get to do something fun and that you love each other by the end of the day. Okay. Bye-bye.